FenestraPro is a suite of facade design tools within the Revit environment that allow designers and allow architects to design energy efficient buildings and energy efficient facades that can comply with code and regulations earlier and cost effectively in the design process without compromising the aesthetic design of the building. So it basically allows designers look at the facade and understand the implications of their design decisions quickly, accurately, and crucially earlier in the process. So broadly speaking, things like glass to wall ratio in total for the building and by orientation. Looking at codes and how that affects both, again, your glass to wall ratio, but different performance values of elements such as your curved wall systems or your windows and your walls, your opaque wall systems. Glazing spec and geometry. So how much glazing should I have, and when I optimally distribute it around the building, what specification should that glass be to avoid overheating, or to optimize my natural daylight, or to achieve a thermal performance that is required under code. We can look at shading solutions within FenestraPro and the effects of those shading, whether it be shading devices or the shading from surrounding buildings and the building itself, on, again, things like daylighting, on things like solar heat gains. And we can visualize and present that data and that feedback graphically and in a manner that we can use to demonstrate your designs to, whether it be clients, other members of the design team, or your own colleagues. So all those things, I suppose, gives us the ability to streamline the design workflow. We can make decisions earlier, quickly, very accurately, and thereby maintaining aesthetic control. So other members of the design team, whether that be a cost consultant or a MEP or whatever that might be, doesn't become the driver of that design late on in the process, leading to reiteration and rework. Code compliance, we can check as we go. We can have a good understanding of the ability to achieve your comp check, or what the implications of certain design decisions are going to be on code compliance. And a big thing for us, we're designers, we were architects ourselves, and is the ability or the requirement for an intuitive tool from concept to the more detailed stages of the design process. So, just to recap on a few existing features of FenestraPro, we can look at optimal glass to wall ratio from the earliest outset of a project, whether it be in conceptual mass or the more detailed elements of Revit, and we can apply that glazing to the model. So we can say under ASHRAE 90.1, we have a maximum of 40% glazing. We can very quickly apply that and understand what the performances of different elements are going to be, or vice versa. If we have prescriptive performances, we can see what the optimal glass to wall ratio is. But then we can also distribute that in an optimal manner. So we may have less to the south, more to the north, somewhere in between east and west, while also giving the ability to change that manually and say, I want 80% glazing to my south, or whatever that might be. But all the while understanding the solar heat gains, understanding the thermal performance, and understanding the daylighting. We can automatically apply glazing solutions, whether that be window penetrations or curtain wall assemblies, to a model based on other parameters, than just an aesthetic. We could say, I want a 40% glass to wall ratio, and FenestraPro will preview it onto the model. But we could say, I want 40% with a known window penetration size, say 1 meter by 2 meters, and FenestraPro will get as close to that 40% as possible. Or we could say, I want a curtain wall assembly that has a limit of 20 watts per square meter within the space of solar overheating, and FenestraPro will appropriate the size, and we can sort of start tweaking that and changing parameters until we're happy with it, and then it will populate the Revit model with Revit families with those given geometric parameters, but also the glazing spec that you've assigned. We can provide intuitive search and comparison of different glazing types based on things like the environmental performance directives, or the location of the availability of that glass, or performance requirements parameters such as U value versus solar heat gain coefficient. So you can very much filter down in FenestraPro link, say I want a known thermal performance, filter down to show you what glass types are available. We can select one of those and apply it to the Revit model. And crucially, those properties will assign to your Revit family, and you'll therefore see the thermal performance of the building change, or the facade change, or the solar heat gains within the space, or the daylighting within the space, etc. Shading solutions, we can understand the implication on those energy performance parameters, very quickly in a conceptual mass, but also in a more detailed model, and say if I have a 4-foot deep shading device, my daylight, my solar heat gains will be much more manageable, but my daylighting will be reduced far too much. So very quickly, very intuitively, we can get an understanding of that. But not only that, we've started expanding that out, which I'll speak about now in a second, into much more robust shadings data and solutions. So surrounding buildings, the building itself, all of those kind of all of that kind of information we'll start covering. And we can graphically display and demonstrate that data in different ways, whether it be through HTML, where we can customize different charts and different graphs, etc., or export all the data in HTML or into Excel, that you can create your own graphs and your own charts to tell your own story. So in a very detailed manner, we can look at performance different months, or different surfaces, different facades. So things like solar heat gains, things like the thermal performance, things like quantities of different materials. So I have X square meters of this type of glass on this facade, so you can very quickly start quantifying whether it be materials or performances or whatever that might be, So then on to some of the newer features. Oh, sorry, just to recap on our products, I suppose, FenestraPro for Revit is that core add-in to Revit, which looks at those energy considerations based on the aesthetic decisions that you make around your facades. Understanding of how you can be compliant with code earlier and cost effectively without compromising the design of the building. FenestraPro Link offers that database of facade components, mainly glass, showing a lot of the leading manufacturers' products, but also more generic glass types that you can filter down and search for glass type, and search for a material that achieves these parameters, and assign that to your Revit model, and thereby updating the properties and seeing the implications of those decisions. Premium is a bundle of all of that functionality, but also network seats, full support and training for all users. So much more applicable to larger firms. So we have multiple users and people, touching off the facade at different stages of the design of a building. And then moving on into like a wider firm-wide solution where we offer an enterprise agreement. So again, all of the features and benefits of those tools, access to our platform where we're starting to look at Rhino models and SketchUp models through BIM 360, firm-wide activation, so use for anyone across the firm, and full training and support as before for all users.